underwater industry in any area, guess what? That's the San Jose. So then why are we so draconian?
Welcome back. It's nice and warm in here. Thanks for going on our tour. This was the first time we've done a tour since we started construction. And is that okay? So we put this in. Every day our contractor produces a map that shows all the activities that are going on that particular day. And the contractor, Balfour Beatty's got about 100 to 150 people working on the plant each day. And they farm out from their staging area right there all over the plant. Our parking area is down in this part of the plant. And so we have about 4 or 5 major activities going on in any day. And so what we've done the last few months is fly a drone over the plant to sort of capture a bird's eye view of the work. And so we wanted to show this. These are pretty short. There's 2 videos that we made with the drone. But this is where you were standing just a minute ago, right here. And we wanted to point out that our contractor, Balfour Beatty, has a very deliberate safety program every morning. All the workers start with a safety meeting and with exercises. And then
right on cue.
Pedro leads the safety meetings in the morning. But, we're really pleased with our safety record. We've been working, how much, 350 days now, plus or minus?
355 days without a lost recordable, OSHA recordable on the job site. Like you mentioned, between 120 and 130 personnel on site. That's not including the plant facility operations. Steve probably has at least 20 to 30 people here during the day. Yeah, we talk about safety all the time to reinforce that zero harm model that we have. Zero harm to the environment, zero harm to our job site, equipment, and anything else. So taking care of one person, taking care of one task at a time will prevent anyone from getting injured. And obviously you see the great turnout that this project's become. So glad to be here.
Congratulations. That's a big deal not to have any injuries.
Okay, so we have a second video that our videographer, our drone pilot put together to try to give you a sense of the progress on the project. So this is area 1 in September. Then in October, you can see the work that gets done back in May. This is the ozone contactor area. This is the work that's going on. A lot of pipe had to go in underground before we could start building the walls. You can see the walls under construction now. And this is that big wall that we can see out from the deck with the lights on it. Area 6 is the flock sed basins, and a lot of progress on the flock sed basins in the last few months. The drone photography gives us a unique perspective, obviously, to the work. This is really interesting. This is where all that excavation occurred that I was describing in the truck traffic. And now here, August, they had all the walls stabilized and reinforced, and now the structures being constructed inside the excavated and stabilized area. This is the electric pad construction. There are 32 piles. The reason we have to build an electric pad up on piles like that is there's very little space for the plant to develop these kind of facilities at the plant, so we actually had to create space by building this elevated platform. The platform, when it's finished, will have our generators and switch gear and all the electrical equipment that's needed to run the plant. So here's where we were standing just now, and this is the view and a little bit of the progress that's being made on the project. So, okay, as Amandeep showed you in a previous slide, phase 2 is the work that we're doing right now. Of the total project, the most intense work occurs in phase 2. Phase 4 will have some pretty intense work when we build the filters and commission them, but phase 2's got a lot of work. Almost half of the total production of the plant will be done when we're finished with phase 2. And so we're just continuing the work that you saw under construction tonight and in the photos and the drone flight. But one of the messages is that there aren't any other large excavations expected to occur in the next few months. The next major sort of effort that we'll be doing that involves truck traffic will be the demolition of the clarifiers, and that probably won't happen until the winter of 2017-2018. So now it's Tony's turn.
My turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're doing a little tag team tonight, try to bring it up.
Okay, well, I'm going to touch really briefly on just a subject that's very important to me because I'm the neighborhood liaison for the treatment plant, and that's the level of outreach. And what we focus on a lot, we want to make sure that as many people in and surrounding the area here are aware of the work that is going on at the Rinconada plant. Rinconada has a long history about being a good neighbor in this community. And with the advent of the construction, it's something that I know Mike and Steve and our communications department is very interested in making sure we keep that standard going. So what you have here is you have my phone number to my office, 630-2342, as well as my email. You can reach me at any time as well. This is a screenshot of our project log, which we launched about 1.5 years ago to help keep people notified on a consistent basis about work that takes place at the treatment plant. If there's any changing truck schedules, sometimes that happens. This is a way for us to let people know that there's going to be work taking place, such as moving a trailer that was going to be resulting in some truck traffic, announcing the public meeting. So we've been lately put an article out there about the speed indicator signs to help combat some of the concerns about traffic. So you may have noticed coming in, hopefully it wasn't too dark, but we have these construction signs in place at the gates, entry gates to the treatment plant. And that phone number is actually my personal cell phone number. So you can call anytime, 24/7. If there's any kind of a problem, I will always pick up the phone and answer it. So AM, PM. I've gotten a call at 1 a.m. So, and on weekends, so it's okay. That's why it's up there. So, please feel free. And that information is available up front. Also on a sheet that we have for the Rinconada blog, it tells you how to log in, how to subscribe to it. We also use an Access Valley water system, which is our customer response system. And that will also allow you to type in any concerns. Staff member will get back to you. We try and make sure that we respond back within 24 to 48 hours. So hopefully we've done a pretty good job with that. So that's about all there is to it. Oh, and filling out the Access Valley water case, make sure, especially when it comes to things like speeding and traffic, provide us with as much information as you can. That will help us track down the issue a lot quicker the more information that we have. So I have in my hand here, and maybe you can, I'll pass it out as we go to the Q&A. Essentially, it's just a quick little survey, so you can let us know how we did. We take all that information, and if there's any other questions, we'll make sure that we can answer for you as well.
We'll do a little question and answer in just about 2 minutes. But the last slide is that we plan to have another quarterly meeting in 3 months, which would be February, roughly February timeframe. It'll be same place, same time of the day, and like Tony said, we notified tonight. There was notifications went out to all of our neighbors. We posted on our blog site, so we try to keep people informed when we're going to have a public meeting, so that you can be here with us at the plant and see the work we're doing. So with that, we're open for questions and concerns and suggestions, and just to try to put all this in context before we start the questions, the purpose of our public meeting here, our neighborhood meeting, is to meet with our neighbors and talk about our project and what impacts it's having on them and what we can do to mitigate impacts that they're having and make our relationship with the neighbors the best that it can be. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? I may not be able to answer all the questions, but we'll try to find the right answer here. Yes?
The work that you're doing is very impressive, and I wasn't aware of that. However, as a consumer, I would like to know, you're not directly using Santa Clara Valley Water District, you use San Jose Water. How would that affect our rates? Because our rates have been going up for the past 2 years, and we have cut down usage. Our plants are dried up. And you're still phase 2. It's very impressive. I like what you're doing, but I'd like to know what should I expect in years to come.
Okay.
Is that something I should ask you, or San Jose Water?
No, I think
Well, it's something that we can certainly try to address here. So San Jose Water Company is one of our retailers. So this water that is cleaned and made ready to meet all the potable standards is sold to various retailers, such as San Jose Water Company. There's San Jose Municipal Company, that's part of the city of San Jose. There's Cal Water, and then a number of different cities, Mountain View, Campbell, a few others, who sell water directly to their customers. So if you're a customer of San Jose Water Company, you are very likely drinking the water that is treated here at this treatment plant, all right? We schedule the district on an annual basis, every year, our board of directors evaluates the costs of water, projects out, and this is what staff does and then presents to the board, what are going to be the financial costs of keeping the valley-wide system of treatment plants, pump stations, distribution pipelines. All of that has to be kept running so water can be served to people like you and me every single day, all right? What the period that we're in, and one reason why water rates are going up, there's several reasons. Number one, as we told you at the beginning of this presentation, this plant was built almost 50 years ago. Plants such as this last about 50 years, and then they start falling apart, the equipment falls apart, and what we're doing right now is a major makeover. This plant is going to serve the valley, once it's completed, for the next 50 years. So if we finish it in 2020, it will last until 2070. At that point, whoever's at the water district, whoever is running this water system is likely going to have to then rebuild it all over again. So we're in this period now where a lot of what we call our infrastructure, this is our water treatment plants, it's pipelines. And we're not talking about little PVC pipes, we're talking about pipes that are 5, 6, even 10 feet in diameter that crisscross this whole valley, moving water around so that, again, every customer has water when they turn on the tap. Those were put in place 50, 60, sometimes even longer in terms of years ago. Pipelines have a certain lifetime, so pipelines start to degrade and fall apart. And so we're in this period very similar to many, many different cities and areas around the country where the infrastructure is aging and has to be replaced, or what we say rehabilitated, so that it's going to last for another 50 years, another 60 years. So we're kind of hitting a peak right now over the next 10, 20 years of taking on these projects of rehabilitation. So very likely, water rates are going to continue to rise. That's one aspect of water rates. The other one, and we've kind of been hit with a double whammy because of what we've been in I think a 4 or 5, maybe going on to a 6-year period of drought. What we have to do during a drought is not only we ask people to conserve, but we still have to run our whole system. We don't shut any part of our system down. There are costs associated with that. We have to buy chemicals to treat the water, just as Steve explained. We have to have staff on hand at our treatment plants night and day to make sure they keep operating. We keep staff busy doing operations and maintenance of all of our pipeline systems. A lot of water moving back and forth that most people day to day don't realize. So even though there's less water available and all of you have done your part and done a tremendous job in terms of conserving when our board has asked for conservation and water use reduction, we still have fixed costs to keep the system running, all right? So if our revenue goes down because we're not selling as much water to the different retailers who buy the water from us, but our fixed costs stay the same, and on top of that, we have to be investing in the future life of all of these pieces of our infrastructure, we have to raise the water rates. I'll stop there because there may be some follow-up questions that I can touch on. Yes?
Yeah, again, I want to thank you for that tour. It was really eye-opening and exciting. I'm going to reiterate a little bit on what the lady just said here. So I saw that it took 2 bond votes and required voter approval to get funding when the plant was built. Your website is very informative, and I want to thank you on that again. So now with the Rinconada Reliability Improvement Project doing a complete replacement and upgrade of all your major components, it's like a rebuild again. And I see on your site that it's at a cost of nearly $250 million. I can't even say that number, it's too big. $250 million. That's a huge number. That's a number that, so you say on the website that all the ratepayers and water users are going to be paying through our increased water rates that amount. So my first question is, how long will it take to recover the projected $250 million from the ratepayers? Did you give a guideline where you're trying to collect that within 16, 17, 18, within 2 years? Because that would make a big reason why we're seeing $1,000 bills. And so how long do you want to collect that in?
All right, so what we normally do, and this has been our practice at the district for many, many decades, is we collect revenue for the water that we sell to the retailers, and when we come to these big projects, we usually we pay cash for about 30% of the cost. Then we borrow, we sell bonds as a public agency, we sell bonds, which means we borrow money for the remainder. So if you want to talk about 250, a third of that is about 80 million, all right? And then we borrow the other, 170, right? When we borrow that much money, we then basically agree on paying a mortgage back to the bonding companies. So it's a 30-year payback.
So you're collecting the 250
The 250 million is
over 30 years from the ratepayers?
right. We're collecting a little bit every year so that we can pay the principal and interest on the amount that we borrowed, right? So if you get it at 5% interest rate, you know, most of you have bought homes and have paid them off or are still paying them off. You pay a certain amount every year. We pay a monthly, I don't know what exactly our payments are back to the lenders, but over the next 30 years, the cost of this plant is going to be paid back, all right? Then there will be a 20-year period where no costs will have to be collected for this particular project, right? But then, about 50 years down the road, we'll be going through that cycle again.
Is there a reason they didn't take it to a bond measure for the voter approval for this project?
Well, so the rates that the board sets, which included, I believe I said at the beginning of the meeting, we have $2 billion worth of capital improvements that we're doing throughout our water system. So this is 10% of, and there are about 25 projects that I oversee, ranging from dam seismic retrofits to large pipeline replacements, et cetera. I'm not gonna go into it in detail tonight, but each of those has a schedule and a time frame for planning the work, designing the work, and then actually doing the construction. So we put all of that planned and current expenditure into what we call a long-range forecast. We look out over the next 5 to 10 years and say, how much are we going to have to expend every year to make sure we address all these different projects that have to be done in order to keep the system running. So our board then raises the rates, looks at the amount that we plan to sell in terms of water, potable water, and then how much do we have to charge for that water to make up and be able to pay 30% of each of our capital investments and then borrow the rest and pay it off over a longer term. Does that answer your question?
It did. So
Okay.
my understanding is that this project was a big reason for my rate increase of my water bill.
It is one of the reasons, all right? So in the
Big
last,
reason?
it is really 1%. So if this project was not being built, last year our board raised what we call groundwater production charges, all right, which is the amount that people pay per acre foot if they pump the water out of the ground or if they buy treated water from our facilities. The rate from 2015 to 2016 was a 19.9% increase. It was almost 20%. If this project was not part of that mix, it would have been 18.9%, all right? And that's because we've got another 1.8 billion of other work that's going on, all right? The previous year, the rate also increased by, it was 19.7, it was close to 20%.
We
all
had
right?
a 40% increase in 2 years.
In 2 years, right.
40%, that's a
Yes.
big number.
It is. It's a huge amount. Now, that amount is, again, absorbed by the people who buy the water from us, all right? And so that it would be San Jose Water Company. So how they pass on that rate increase and their own costs of keeping all the distribution pipes in your neighborhood, in your system running, all their pump stations, all the wells operating, because they also pull water from the ground. So they buy water from this treatment plant, but they also have pumps all over the valley that they pump water out of the groundwater basin, which we manage. That's another whole hour discussion on that, so I won't get into that. So they, in order for us to meet our bills, they will then turn around and charge their customers.
And then send it back up to you. So it kind of goes like in a big circle from you to
Well,
them to us back to you.
And it doesn't come back, no. They buy it from us, then they turn around and they charge their customers. And then they keep that money.
Okay.
They keep that money. Now, San Jose Water Company is a private company, so it has shareholders. It tries to make a return on the investments.
They do well.
We are a government agency. We do not make any profit. So we charge people for the cost of service. And the cost of service really means building the system, keeping it running, and being, well, rehabilitating or replacing it for the longer term.
So
Thank
are
you.
there actually third-party audits of how you're spending this money?
There we go through normal government agency audits, yes.
And are those available to the public?
They are available to the public. I don't know if you can go on our website, but if you leave me your name and email, I can certainly look into that and get back to you. So the other thing that I wanted to emphasize is our board doesn't make these decisions on annual water rates in a vacuum. We start in December of every year, and they have board meetings on the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month. Those board meetings are publicized. You can go onto our website, you can see the entire agenda. You can read all of the documents for each agenda item. They are streamlined, so you don't even have to go to the meetings. You can sit in the comfort of your home and turn on your computer and view the entire meeting. The meetings are also forever archived, so you can go back and look at any meeting for the last several years. We haven't been doing it for that long. But the board debates, and the public is always welcome to come and voice their opinion on these changes in the water rates. All right, that's one aspect. We also comply with the Prop 218 requirements, and I won't go into that unless people want to hear, but we have a district act. That's the legislative document that created the water district. So this was a state legislative event that happened almost 90 years ago that created this district for the purpose of providing water to this county, all right? So that district act gives us the authority to construct facilities, all right, that are needed to serve the public with potable water, all right? Prop 218 does impact, or does come into play with these annual charges, and I'll go into that, but let me see if there's other questions before I step into that. Why don't we'll go to you first.
Okay, I've got 3 questions here for you. Thank you again for the tour. You indicated, or I was told, that currently you produce 80 million gallons a day here, and essentially you're adding another 25% by going up to 100 million gallons a day. How many more people will that service? How many more people is that expected to service?
Well, we're not really gearing the 100, the additional 20 to more people, although as you see, the valley is building, right? People are tucking in high-density residential in it seems like every vacant lot. So there is going to be a need for more water, although at the same time, because of conservation efforts, we're not using much more water than we were, let's say, 20, 30 years ago.
I've seen the charts on that.
That's, which is really good,
Yeah.
which is also making it possible for the population to expand, right? Because we still have that tolerance within
My
what our
pocketbook is
overall water
depleting.
supply is. All right, but one key reason for adding that 25% was just to allow parts of the plant to go down for operations and maintenance when needed, but that the remaining part could continue to function and continue to provide potable water. So right now, the way that the system is structured, it's really difficult to take down a good chunk of the plant and yet continue to produce water. So with the new system and the way it's configured, we decided to add the other 20 million just again for that additional, what we call reliability. And that's why the project itself is titled Rinconada Reliability Improvements, because the larger capacity will allow us to provide that water more reliably for the next 50 years.
Okay. Do you have a gauge as to currently how much it costs you to produce a gallon of water as the old plant, the current plant is?
So I believe that the number that we often go to the public and give talks to different groups about water and its importance. Right now, it is less than a penny per gallon.
Okay, and with the new structure going in, any idea?
No, because it comes out of our running the whole system, right? So I can't say 250 million is going to add how many tenths of, how many cents to that gallon.
Fair enough. And then the last question I have is, I know San Jose Water Company, when they buy water from you, they buy it for at least 3 years at a time. And how far in advance are you buying your water that you're importing?
So we have long-term contracts with the state of California and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, a federal agency. So in the mid-1960s, the state of California built what is known as the State Water Project, SWP. We participated, we said, if this valley is going to keep growing, this is middle 60s, right, when the boom really started. We said, we don't have enough groundwater and enough local water in our reservoirs to sustain a growing population. So our board at the time made the decision to create a contract with the State Water Resources Control Board, and we bought water. We entered into an agreement that we were going to get a certain amount of water from the State Water Project every year. That water comes through what's known as the South Bay Aqueduct. It comes out of the Delta, Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, and it comes in a big pipeline on the east side of our valley, where we have one of our treatment plants, all right? A few decades later, we bought into a federal project known as the Central Valley Project, CVP, that the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation put into play. And I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that was when that large aqueduct that runs down most of California, that you see off of I-5, right? That is really transporting water from the Delta area, Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta, down to us. We take a part of it. Other regions south of us take a part of it, and then Los Angeles and that area, you know, is at the end of that pipeline. So again, we have an agreement with the Bureau, and we paid into that to get so much water a year from them. That comes in through the San Luis Reservoir, that big reservoir you see on Pacheco Pass, all right? We have big pumps down there that pull the water out, send it up along a huge pipeline that runs kind of along 101, I can't tell you exactly where it is, but you know, along 101, and brings that water up to this valley. Both of those, when we bought into it, we had an agreement that we would get so many acre feet per year, that's all right. But in drought years, that is cut back. And both the state and the federal government make a decision based on how much snow has fallen, how full the reservoirs are up in Northern California, as to how much each of these contractors are going to get in terms of allocations, all right? So that's a year in, year out decision. And we kind of wait. We wait to see how much it rains in December, in January. By February, March, the state comes out with their estimate. A little bit later, it gets firmed up, and the same thing with the Bureau of Reclamation. We have contracts then also with our water retailers that they will purchase a certain amount of treated water. All right, that's water that we produce at our plants. So that, I believe, is, we moderate those every few years, but it's an ongoing and living, you know, document, and we keep very close relationships with our different
They do
retailers.
about 50% or 51% with San Jose Water Company. The
Is
rest
coming
is
from
groundwater,
treated?
but last year, for some reason, you made them take more imported water versus groundwater.
You know why? Because our groundwater levels were dropping. And if groundwater levels drop too much, then the land starts to pancake and settle down.
I was just curious on that, because their
So-
2015 report that came out in 2016 indicated that you would have excessive water to be cooling. So I wondered how much our groundwater's dropped when I hear you say
Right.
that.
Yes, you know, so we are also responsible for maintaining the groundwater basin, which is a huge basin. So think of it as an underground river. Right? It's the ground below us is all dirt, but in between the pores comes water, and it's always flowing in one direction or another. So we recharge the groundwater. Those ponds that you see along Highway 17 when you're driving to Santa Cruz, those are some of our groundwater recharge ponds. We capture water in our reservoirs, Lexington being one of them, right? That's not too far from here. And then we release it during the summer. We fill those ponds, and the water percolates hundreds of feet through layers of sand and gravel, really purifies the water, so that when the pumps, and the pumps are all over, we call them straws in the ground basically, that the retailers like San Jose Water Company, San Jose Muni, Cal Water, all have straws in the ground. When they pump up the water, they usually just add some chlorine and it's good to go. Okay, so it's a very efficient and a very cost-effective way to provide a resource to the community. However, the groundwater basin, as I said, if you pump it down too far, it'll start to pancake. That means our houses settle, right? You may have seen some cracks in your, I've got a crack in my ceiling that I never had before this drought. And it can also damage all sorts of pipes, storm pipes, sewer pipes, water pipes that are in the ground, in the streets, right? If everything starts to sink, you squash that, and we're in real trouble, all right? So billions of dollars of damage would occur if we allowed the groundwater basin to sink too far down. So we're always trying to balance between the imported water we get and what we treat at the treatment plants and what's available in the ground, okay? Very complicated. All right, any other questions, sir?
And
Yes.
so who ultimately is responsible? So we've been experiencing drought for years. We know this is a drought-prone area.
Yes.
What are we doing to find more water or to store more water? We had a representative from Texas who were thinking about doing, these various things, explain desalination. Desalination is too expensive.
Yes.
Well, what are we doing?
Okay, did everybody hear the question? The question is, what are we doing in terms of finding new water sources
We're storing water.
or storing water? Okay, yeah, and that's, again, a multi-level, multi-layer question. So one thing that we have been partnering with the city of San Jose for about 20 years now in terms of expanding what's known as recycled water use. Recycled water is water that has been treated at a wastewater treatment plant and is clean enough to be put on landscaping, can be used for agriculture, can be used in certain industrial commercial processes. So a certain amount of water that comes out of the big treatment plant down on Zanka Road is then put into what's known as purple pipe. That means don't drink. If you see anything coming out of a purple pipe, you don't drink it. And that's kind of the industry standard, is to use purple pipe, and that water then is redistributed to cemeteries. The Levi Stadium gets it, both for flushing toilets as well as for the grass that grows there, and a multitude of other uses. So that's one way that we save drinking water from just going out to plants on the ground. All right. Another thing that we're doing is looking to the future and already planning to go further with the recycling. So going actually to purify that treated wastewater. We're operating a plant already for about 2.5 years that takes that treated wastewater from the San Jose Regional Wastewater Facility, and we send it through microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and then ultraviolet radiation. It's a 3-step process. Out of that comes pure, almost distilled water. The technology exists. It's been in operation down in Southern California for a number of years. Our plan is to build a larger facility, purify that water, and then send it in pipes to our recharge ponds. So instead of just using water from reservoirs to recharge the groundwater, we would be using this purified water to recharge the groundwater.
Where does it come from originally?
Pardon me?
Where does it come from originally?
It comes from
Sewer
all of
water.
us.
It's sewer water.
It's sewer water.
So it's
right?
not salt.
It is not salt water. And what the industry has found is that purifying wastewater is far less expensive and less energy intensive than trying to break up salt molecules and do desalination. Desalination is really kind of a last ditch effort. Now, the problem here is that we're not on the coast, all right? So if we were going to desalinate, we'd have to pull water from San Francisco Bay, which isn't all that salty. There's fresh water that comes in, but then the byproduct of that, if we desalted that water for drinking purposes, the byproduct is a heavy brine. It's a heavy, salty water. So you put that back in the bay, and that could have real implications on the ecosystem, because now you've got this briny water going into a very shallow bay. It's not going out to the ocean where your levels or your depths drop drastically as you come offshore, right, in the Pacific Ocean. So the environmental impacts may be so serious that we may not be able to desalinate in this area. And that's why we're really looking at the whole idea of a complete water cycle, is that we would keep the wastewater right here instead of right now. When it's treated, if it's not used for recycling, the non-potable recycling, it goes out to San Francisco Bay. Okay? And then we bring more fresh water in from the Delta, and it rains and our reservoirs are filled. We use that water. So the concept of not sending it to the bay, but reusing it here in our valley is very potentially a good source of future water for us. Long answer, so sorry.
But really, that's no new water, or no new extra storage. That's maybe more efficient use of the water we have.
It's very efficient use of water, yes.
Well, but what are
Yeah.
we doing for something
So our board is also, has directed staff to explore possible, really enlarging some of our reservoirs that we already have, as well as potentially investing in reservoirs in Northern California that some people are working, different agencies are working on trying to see, can we build more storage facilities so that in years of plenty of rain and snow, we can capture more of that water. So our board is actually considering right now whether to invest in and possibly pay for you know, it wouldn't happen next year, but pay for a certain amount of storage space in a new reservoir. So that is also being looked at. Some of our local reservoirs, Anderson, Calero, we have also been asked by our board to look at what would it cost to raise the dam and how much more water could we store in those reservoirs. Again, at a cost. You know, there are costs involved. Yeah.
But it's better than all your plants
Agreed, yes, yes.
I just, maybe to bring a question more central to the site, I have a comment, one of the questions I got. It's a long project, so if you closely abut the project, the noise over a long period of time, you know, starts to build up on you. And a comment I have is I have found your people to be very responsive in trying to make some changes to alter some of the noise. Specifically, some of the trucks, that loud beeping in reverse, have done things to make that better, and I'd like to commend the staff for doing that. However, I'd also like to say, this project keeps going on, and I would like to encourage you to continue to consider the abutting neighbors relative to noise, where you store things, truck movement. You know, it builds up when you kind of accept a 6, 8 month, 1 year project as it goes on and on and on and on. It just, so whatever you can do, however you can be responsive to, maybe you have a 43-acre site, maybe do more and more of that stuff more in the central part of the site rather than the abutting parts of the site. Speaking as a neighbor, I'd be very appreciative of that.
Okay.
But I do want to say, every time I've called, you've been very responsive. And you not only, sometimes people are responsive and they sort of yes you, and nothing happens. Things actually happen.
Right.
So I'd like
Okay.
to commend your staff.
Thank you for that
But
feedback.
I want you also to maybe keep thinking of the accumulation of that noise and ways
Right.
to
No.
abate it.
We are very aware, and it is going to be a long haul. And maybe what I would ask you to do is just send Tony, where's Tony?
Yeah,
Okay.
Tony knows.
Send him an email to say, oh my gosh, you know, what's going on in this
Right.
corner? Because we just, you know, kind of grit our teeth and realize that has to be done. But the feedback we get is going to continue to be helpful. And if we get that kind of feedback, maybe we can sit down and talk to the contractor and say, okay, is there some different way that this can
That'd
be
be
done?
helpful.
So I'm asking you to make it an ongoing dialogue, because that is going to be helpful to us.
My second question, I will certainly do that. What is a stormwater retention basin? I hadn't heard that before, and you say you're putting them in at the end of the project. What are they, and what do they look like, and where are they?
Well, on the site, when it rains, the stormwater is collected in the whole system, much like the storm drains in the street.
Right.
But we have restrictions from the State Water Resources Control Board about how much water we can let run off of the plant. Because when we build a project like this, we increase the impervious area, so there's less surface that soaks up the water goes across asphalt and in those storm drains. The state requires us to mitigate against extra water going out of the site into the Smith Creek, into the storm drain system in Granada Way or in Moore Avenue. So one way we can do that is we capture the water on site in a pond, and we just let it.
So it'll be at pond level.
Yeah.
Fancy word for big pond.
No, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I was just really
I
not.
could have made a simple answer.
I didn't know. I didn't know the answer.
Okay, yes.
Yes, so I'm from the Sierra Club, and the Sierra Club is very concerned about the fluoride, projects that you are going to put fluoride in the water, adding up to all the fluoride that goes into the environment. Not mentioning especially that's what I want to bring up today, is the risk of spill. We are talking of a very, very corrosive acid, hydrofluorous acid, it eats through concrete if you spill it here. So I just want to know if you have any plan for, is it part of the plan from the water district to, this kind of accident, how do you plan to clean that up? And
Right.
you have to wear a full body suit to clean that up. I mean, this is.
Right, so, and maybe I'll ask Steve to answer that, because we deal with a number of hazardous chemicals.
I only got part of that, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
The concern about fluoride and hydrofluorosilicic acid.
yeah.
in case
And,
of spill.
you know,
Oh, okay.
if there's a spill, how would we clean it up? So I thought maybe, since we already deal with a number
Yeah.
of hazardous chemicals here on this site, what is our protocol
So
for handling?
we handle every chemical, if it's a neutral chemical or acid or basic, the exact same way. If we have a spill, we have a certain absorbent material that we can encapsulate. But the big thing is that all of our facilities are double contained. So if we have a 15,000 gallon tank of a chemical, doesn't matter what it is, we have to be able to contain 110% of what that tank would hold if it was full. Okay, so we build basically containment basin around the tank, which has no outlet. So it encapsulated. So if there was a catastrophic failure and that tank was to leak out or burst, we'd be able to encapsulate that material. Now, as far as spills and stuff like that, we're set up, again, with absorbent materials. We have all of our PPE, personal protective equipment, that every single operator here at the district and maintenance people can don to be able to combat any spill. So now, as far as fluoride is concerned, I've worked with fluoride since I started in this business in 1989, and we take it one step further because it has hydrofluorosilicic acid is very aggressive, and so we have special PPE that we'll be donning that will fully encapsulate the operator or maintenance person that's working on that piece of equipment. So does that help?
Yeah, of course, that's the spill that occurs on the plant, but you know what we are talking about is trucks.
Well, the trucks
coming every
leading
month,
up to
cleaning
the-
up the stuff. So
Well,
that's an
the truck,
additional risk.
here at the plant, once it comes into the plant, even in the offloading area, is double contained. So the trucks have to come up, go over a little berm, and there's drains in the ground that if the tank leaks onto the ground, if we can't absorb it with absorbent material, then it actually will be going into two 5,000 gallon
That's right.
tanks that will encapsulate that, then we can haul that off with the hazardous waste company.
Well,
Steve, I
that's
think
the most
one part of this
corrosive.
question though is what happens if the fluoride delivery truck has a spill or a break outside the plant?
That is, all trucks are DOT rated for the different kind of chemicals that they're hauling. So, I mean, it's up to the trucking company or the manufacturer to assure that is, they're properly maintained. The water district isn't responsible for it until it gets onto the property. Actually, until we take ownership of it.
Yeah, because we are talking of about 30 tons of products, coming in every month. Actually, up to 50 once the entire, area codes. 25 area codes are fluoridated. So that's a
So I mean, I can't talk about the trucking companies or distributors and stuff like that. I can just tell you what we do here at the plant.
Yeah.
You said you deal with a lot of chemicals. Will that fluoridating chemical be the most corrosive on site that you've ever dealt with?
That
At
I've
this-
ever dealt with?
No, at this plant?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a highly corrosive.
It's very acidic. But we also have high bases here as well,
Right.
which
The
are
other
also
way.
very corrosive.
Sure, okay, just wondering.
Yeah.
Hazmat guy said he's never seen anything like that come through his area, so he was just
No,
concerned.
we're very, we take it very seriously.
I'm sure you do.
Not only for the environmental impact, but our personnel.
Of course. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing you say is that if we have 5 more winters of water like we had last winter, just say in our dreams that would happen, nothing is going to change with the cost of our water bills because the money that you're putting into these plants. And so I think what all of us are dealing with is that we've all been very good sports. We've all taken tremendous cuts. I've cut my water consumption by half. I've had to take out 2 oak trees this year that died. And everybody can handle that But when there's no hope of improvement, it's very frustrating and very disgusting to open your bill month after month and see these numbers just go up and up and up and watch the water pouring out of the sky. Do you understand our frustration?
Yes. No, I understand. I am a customer myself of the San Jose Water Company. So I've seen, I've cut and I've cut and I've cut, and the bills just go higher and higher. And again, the only thing that I can just repeat is what I said at the beginning, is we have aging infrastructure. So if we want to keep receiving water, or if we want to keep delivering water to all of you and to the businesses and schools and everybody who lives and works in this valley, we have to take care of our system. So it's really those system costs that require that investment of capital, of new capital. And yes, we are still going to, in fact, we're just preparing what we're going to take to our board on December 13th. Is going to be the first kind of shot across the bow, the first presentation by staff to the board to say, here's our outlook on what these projects are going to cost over the next 5 years, and this is our projection for what the water rates to be considered for this next year are going to be. I will tell you that we are honestly trying to do our best to bring it down from the 2 digits down to at least a high single digit, all right? And that, I can't promise that, but I would definitely invite all of you, December 13th, the meeting starts at 6 o'clock. It's at the board headquarters on Almaden Expressway. You're welcome to come. You're welcome to voice your opinions. I mean, the board listens to the voters, and the board makes decisions always in that public forum. So it's important for people to come and voice those opinions. It's important for the board to hear from you. So you can either watch the proceedings or you can attend the meeting and listen to that discussion and get a little bigger picture, because I don't have the right charts to show you in terms of our projects and in terms of our upcoming costs, again, to keep this system operating for the next 50, and then longer period of time. Okay, but that is going to be it. Then the board, we come back, I think in February with an updated estimate, and then the board holds a public hearing, which again takes place in the evening in April. And that's when they make the decision about what the rate increase is going to be for the following year. And this is repeated every year. All the meetings are public. The public is welcome to attend. All right, you had a question, yes?
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck on that $250 million for the project, and I have kind of 2 questions. One is, how many different construction companies do you have working on this project? And 2, how were they vetted and how were their contracts accepted or evaluated?
I'll take that question. We pre-qualified contractors for this project because it's so big. In other words, we advertised a year ahead of the start of construction for contractors that were interested in bidding on the project. We received about 13 proposals, statement of qualifications. Those proposals were reviewed by our consultant HDR and by district staff, and we had a criteria for selecting the pre-qualified contractors. From the 13 that submitted applications, we pre-qualified 9 contractors. When we had a mandatory pre-proposal meeting, only 7 of the 9 contractors came to the mandatory meeting. So in other words, 2 contractors disqualified themselves. And then when we opened bids, we had 5 contractors bid on the project. Our engineer's estimate was about $183 million. Our low bid from Balfour Beatty was $179,500,000. So it was very close to our engineer's estimate. The other 4 bidders were very close as well. The high bidder was Kiewit Construction, and they were off from the low bid by about $20 million. They bid $20 million higher. So we were very pleased that Balfour Beatty was the low bidder. They have an excellent reputation. When we did the pre-qualification, they scored very highly. We talked to municipalities and other owners that have worked with Balfour Beatty. We looked at their safety records, and we vetted them through the financial analysis of their bonding capacity and that kind of criteria.
So does it get final approval from the board? When you say we, is that the board that does the final approval?
Well, we showed the slide. Can we go back to that slide?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss what you wrote?
Well, sort of, but it won't take any time. The project actually goes to our board here. This is the step that you're talking about, awarding the construction contract. Previously, about 3 or 4 months before that, the board approved the plans and specs and authorized us to advertise the project. This is a big milestone for all of our projects. This is the board signing off. Most projects that have approved plans and specs by the board and we accept bids on actually get awarded. And but the point of this other information is to show that these 2 steps here weren't the first time the board saw the project. They certified the environmental impact report. They approved what we call an engineer's report that describes the project and the cost of the project. And then there was intermediate steps where the board has to approve a planning study report, and also the board takes our agreements with consultants very seriously. Our consultant selection is highly competitive and transparent, and so when we make an award for a large consultant agreement, the board deliberates on that and gives us approval.
And how are they on target with that price, with the bid that they gave you?
Well, we're still pretty early in the project. We've had a couple of change orders, we have what's called a contingency amount with the project. So when the board awarded the contract, they authorized us to expend money from a contingency if there's changes. A project this complex, there's always changes, but right now we're within, I'd say we're within 2 or 3% of the bid amount. For work so far. We're 15 months into a 60-month project, so just one quick thing on that. If you've ever remodeled a kitchen or done any work in your house, there's this tendency that once you get a contractor on the site and you're building things, and then you think, oh, I always wanted to replace the central heating system because I got a contractor on my side. We're very deliberate in the little things that come up during construction about scope creep and about working with our operations and maintenance people when they find things that they think might be helpful to add to the project. We're very serious in how we evaluate those.
I'm actually very interested in this useful life of a plant being 50 years. I live 1.1 mile from this plant. I have Ciro, made in the USA, copper pipes, and my copper is leaching 3 times a month chemical. 17-year-old pipes. So what is your analysis of the corrosive nature? San Jose Water naturally had to come in and test it several times. They went to Alpha Laboratories. You guys tested it several times. Torrent tested it several times on Milpitas. 3 times public health gold, made in America, 17-year-old copper pipes. My family was sick. If your water is corrosive and you're doing all this with the infrastructure now, I mean, what is your suggestion with copper pipes a mile away from your plant? What are you guys going to do about that?
Well, this was actually a question then when we were out in the field. Somebody asked me about if our water's corrosive. Actually, we have a number of processes that we treat the water to make sure that it is neither corrosive nor it deposits too much material onto the lining of the piping. The reason we take it very seriously because, as Catherine had mentioned, we've got hundreds of miles of pipe, some of them 10 feet tall. That's more for raw water. But, the largest pipe going out of this plant is 72 inches. That's a lot of money if we don't make sure that the water is non-corrosive, because then we'll have to replace that pipe at a huge cost. So the whole thing is not just to make the water clean when it leaves the plant, but to make sure that it's neither depositing materials onto the piping nor stripping it out, which is the corrosivity of the water. So we have a chemical called phosphoric acid that we add that actually helps with the coating of the piping when it leaves the plant, but also doesn't strip anything out of it. So it's, I don't want to call it neutral, but it's really neither corrosive nor basic. And I just want to say that even though you're 1.5 miles away from the plant, you may not be getting the water directly from the plant. It's probably it's transmitting through whoever, San Jose Water, yeah. So, you know, depending on exactly where you are, they could be blending from somewhat. Yeah. Now, here I'm going to get into the water geek speak. Well water can be corrosive. And so I'm not saying that what the water that they're putting out can be, but it may be.
So we turned off the water softener to put deposits in the pipes. And per their own tests, they don't have any third party, they come and test their own water. They said it stopped leaching. I haven't gone and done my own private test again. But my question is, so obviously copper is not the proper for the medium that you're serving to the public. What are you replacing the pipes with? When you are replacing the infrastructure, what material are the pipes made of now?
So that's kind of, maybe Mike can jump in. So we got to just differentiate between a distribution system, which is, Catherine mentioned, a smaller diameter pipe, compared to a distributary or main distribution system that we have. So, like I said, we start at 72 inches, and it's concrete pipe line.
Cement mortar line.
Thank you. Cement mortar line steel pipe. So it has a concrete motor to it. And then when it goes into the distribution system at the turnouts to our retailers, that pipe could either be ductile iron, C900 PVC, it could be old, what we call old cold rolled steel, depending on when it was put in the ground. Cast iron. And back in the 70s, they put this stuff in, I can't even remember the acronym of it.
AC.
It's even, yeah, it was terrible. And all that stuff's still in the ground. Right. And then, but the copper piping in your house, I'm actually in Great Oaks Water District, and that water is very hard. So I have a water softener.
They don't have chloramine.
But I have a water softener, and if you're not managing your water softener, you could be taking too much hardness out of the water, and then that water actually becomes corrosive within your own house.
Right.
So it's very, 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 very important that you manage. People have a tendency just to set it and forget it. To manage your water softener, and that we can talk offline if I can try to help you out with that.
But Mike, maybe you could also add, because I think you were asking, what about this facility? What kind of pipes are we using
Right.
in the
So
facility
they last
to
more
move
than
things
50
around?
years.
So all the pipe that's lying out there that we saw on the ground.
It's what Steve just
Okay.
cement mortar line steel pipe with a reinforcing concrete coating on the outside. Yes.
You have a big plant here. These projects are 50 years long. You depreciate them. You build up a kitty. They don't pop out of a box like a child's jack-in-the-box. So why do my bills pop out of a box like a child's jack-in-the-box? They go from $130 to $500. Is there any kind of pre-planning here at all? This isn't something you just now figured out in 2012.
A reserve fund.
I mean, for
Right.
God's sake.
So that question does come up, is if we knew we were going to spend 200 or 250 million, why didn't we start saving for that years ago, right? And there's a couple of points to be made there. Number one, that we would build up reserves. If an agency puts too much and has too much cash on hand, that's something that the state oversees. And it's not a good practice. About 10 years ago, we had a fairly large kitty reserves, and the state came in and took about $60 million of that, couldn't do anything about it, and shifted it to another resource that they needed to fund within the state. So we never got that money back. So that's one, you know, in the larger scheme of things, it's prudent to have some fund on hand, but at the same time, not to build up too much. The other thing is that people would likely protest and say, why are you taking our money and just sitting on it? And now you guys are investing in it, rather than me being able to. So, you know, the water rates, if we were going to go ahead and do that and build up a $300 million bank account just for this project, those water rates would have risen a long time ago, so that we'd have that cash on hand to pay the contractor over the next 5 years. So again, just as with balancing the groundwater basin, balancing imported water with groundwater use, we have to balance also and be prudent civil servants in terms of what we take in and how much we expend, so that, you know, we're not gouging people in, you know, way in advance of any project being built. So you're right, it seems that everything has popped up, but I'm going to emphasize again, it's not just the large capital projects that we're undertaking, it's the fact that this drought has really curtailed water use, which is great, but then we still have to run the system, right? And so then you get into that awkward spot where we didn't make enough money, and yet we still have to outlay so much for operations and maintenance just to keep the system running. So I know it's difficult for you to understand, and I probably won't be able to answer your question to your satisfaction.
But you guys don't get the surcharges, penalty surcharges. It goes to San Jose Water.
Right.
Everything goes to San Jose Water. Everything on your bill goes to San Jose Water, because San Jose Water has already paid us before they turned around and paid you. Now, I don't know enough about how their system of rates works, but I know they have to go to the Public Utility Commission, the PUC, to get approvals for raising their rates. And I don't know enough details about that process, but that's something that they're engaged with. And again, there probably are meetings held for the public to attend when those rate hearings are being discussed between the different private water companies.
The allocations upon which the surcharges are based won't even be explained to us by the San Jose Water. How they got it, how they established it, they won't say it.
Yeah, well, I certainly can't, again, they run their own system. I can't speak for the way that they've set up those penalties or limits on what people can use. So, yes, gentlemen?
So the unhappy people in the room are probably all San Jose Water Company customers who have seen their bills go up 100, 200, 300, 400, 500%. And San Jose Water is saying that they're shifting part of the blame, at least saying that it's the water district raising the rates. But if I heard you earlier, I think you said last year, the year before, it was a 20% increase. And then
Close
maybe
to 20, yes.
and the next year it was another 20% increase. So that's certainly a large number, and people here can debate whether that's good or not, but that doesn't account for San Jose Water Company's multi-100% increases in bills. So maybe just to reiterate, so could you say maybe that 2013, or do you know offhand 2014, 2015, 2016 rate increases that the Santa Clara Valley Water District?
That one?
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, 2013, Santa Clara Valley Water District in 2013 did a 9.3% increase. 2014 did a 9.9% increase. 2015 a 19.7. 2016 a 19.9. I can go back further if you
Okay.
want, but.
What was 2009 through 2012?
Pardon me?
What was 2009 through 2012?
2009.
I know the answer. It was just, basically, you get a lot of flack for the rate increases. And as Catherine mentioned, we're not a for-profit entity. Part of the reason we can't just hoard cash is because we have to basically speak to the taxpayers When we start hoarding cash, bad things tend to happen. You get articles in the Merc about how the district has a war chest, where the golden spigot, we're just taking people's money. Which is why you see that in those times, we thought we were properly funded before we kind of got hammered at a couple different junctures. And there is a direct correlation between the rate increases you're seeing that were debated heavily. At one point, the board thought it was justifiable to do a 30% increase, but that was just too much to bear. So they attempted down to under 20. But that directly coincides with the drought, as you can see. Basically, from 2012 to 2016 is our 4 years of drought. That's when you're kind of seeing those rates increase. In the beginning of 2012, when it's about 10%, they're trying to go for a moderate increase, but as the drought worsens and we sell less water, obviously we don't get the revenue that we need. And then, as Catherine says, the projects keep progressing, the lights still have to be turned on, and then the cumulative effect of the rate increases kind of get worse, and we're at 20%. We're trying to roll that back. We are definitely cognizant of the kind of hurt that's been experienced by everyone. I mean, we are customers ourselves. I'm a San Jose Water customer too. So, I look at the bill and I'm not happy. I know that the district does its part to try to maintain some semblance of reasonableness. And I'm not throwing San Jose Water under the bus because I do not know anything about how they set their rates. But in all fairness, we are trying to mitigate some of the long-term infrastructure impacts that we have against the diminishing revenue that we're projecting. We are doing some projects to increase storage, as we said, find other water sources, kind of stabilize. The delta, one of the questions that was on the filter deck, someone had basically stated we couldn't pump water out of the delta. And we said, no, we do. We still take water from the delta. The issue is, way back before Katrina happened, we were able to take about twice as much water from the delta. There was no drought, and there was no concern about the levee failures in the delta. So when Katrina happened, the state curtailed its distribution and basically kind of drove everything down because of the risk of a seismic event and a catastrophic failure. So you kind of get hit with a different landscape. The district is trying to do its best to adapt to the situation. So that's a long way to say I loaded the question.
But in all of that, I think we still need to be very cognizant of the fact that this is not sustainable. The residents cannot handle these kinds of rate increases. We're already feeling it to the point where some people, it's a third of their income at this point. It's not sustainable. So that needs to be taken into consideration whenever future rate hikes are being negotiated. Whether it's your infrastructure, maybe you don't need to do quite the elaborate project you're doing because the residents can't afford it. We can't help you sustain these kinds of changes.
And it's surprising to me that with your additional 25% capacity you're putting on here with this large project, you cannot tell me how many more customers it's going to serve. I would think that would be something that you'd be able to project with that project.
So I'll ask Mike, because Mike was more involved with the environmental impact report that addressed that particular aspect of the project. So correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, in terms of the answer I gave.
The district does a lot of long-term forecasting for demand. Obviously, we're a water utility and we have to plan ahead to meet demand. It's the projections for population growth in the South Bay are made mostly by a Bay Area regional group, and we look at those, and their projections in the South Bay are not, I think something like 2 or 3% per year, and so the problem is that those projections don't go out very far, 10 or 15 years. When we look at them in the past, they haven't been that reliable. They haven't been that good of a forecast. So what our plan was in this project was to consider that there may be moderate growth in the South Bay. Like Catherine mentioned, the infilling of residential. A lot of the water demand in the South Bay is people that come to work here. And it's hard to understand the economics that are going to play out over the next 5, 10, 15, 50 years here. So right now, one of the reasons that the South Bay is a thriving economy is because we are the Silicon Valley. We're a very high-tech area. So we see that there may be growth with that. And so we want to build a water supply system that can meet that growth. And so our projections are of the need for the additional 20 million gallons was partially to sustain growth, but mostly it's to provide the reliability of the plant. It's, you know, an analogy might be if you're going to pull a trailer with your car, you could buy a 200 horsepower car and you could pull the trailer, but if you want to be going over the top of the hill at 50 miles an hour, you want a car that's maybe got 300 horsepower. What we're building here is more horsepower so that we can sustain problems that come up when we're operating a big system like this, where a filter goes offline, we don't have a way to back it up, we have a failure of a chemical feed system, we have some sort of a crazy raw water incident where we're getting a lot of turbidity in the South Bay Aqueduct, and things have to change quickly. And with the plant we're building, we have the flexibility to close one whole side of the plant off and continue to make water while we work on that side of the plant. So we're not laying the need for growth of the capacity of the plant on growth of the population in the area as much as we are on building the stronger, more reliable water treatment plant.
So how will you be addressing that? Because I think ABAG is expecting population to be up to, what is it, 2.3 million by 2030 or 2035? How will you be addressing the need for God's given commodity, water?
So as I said, we are going to continue encouraging people to conserve. A lot of the new infill that is being constructed is high density. There's not a lot of lawns, or if there are open spaces, they often will contain drought-tolerant plants so that you don't use a lot of outdoor watering. So those new residential areas are very much just focused on indoor water use. And you know, we often put out this statistic that in our suburban areas, 40% of a residential home use in an annual basis is for outdoor irrigation, so it's almost half.
Right.
All right, that's what we have gotten used to in California, despite it being a Mediterranean climate, despite it being, there probably wasn't too much grass here, you know, other than the native, you know, the native grasses that grew during the winter, until we came and brought our East Coast, or wherever we came from, our traditions to say lawns are important and we want to water them and keep them watered. And when the population was small and the climate was different, that was not a problem. Even here, this is going back to 2005, the costs for water from the water district 11 years ago were $400 per acre foot. An acre foot has 326,000 gallons. So it's the amount of water that 1 acre, that would cover 1 acre 1 foot deep. And it's just easier to use for people who buy and sell and move around big chunks of water than the gallons per day or million gallons per day that we use at the treatment plant. But you'll see in these years of plenty, where we had normal rainfall, where the snow fell on the Sierras, there were slight bumps along the way. In fact, there were 3 years where the board did not raise the rates at all. The rate stayed at $5.20 for 3 years. Was that wise? People felt really good about it then. But perhaps looking back, had they provided a bump in those years, maybe the spikes that we're seeing here would not be as profound, right? And sometimes you only see that when you look back and you get that 20/20 vision. So this is where we are today. And just if I could make people feel a little bit better, the red dashed line that's creeping up there, that's what Hetchy users pay in San Francisco. That is SFPUC treated water. All right, so where our retailers are buying water at $750 approximately dollars per acre foot, if you come up to the same year, it's almost twice as much in the San Francisco area. So we certainly are not, in this region, we're certainly not the ones with the highest rates. Now, the city of San Francisco, for those of you who are familiar with their system, they rely on the Hetchy Reservoir. It's a wonderful reservoir, the best water ever. But they have spent close to $4.5 billion in the last 10 years to upgrade and rehabilitate and seismically strengthen a lot of that the pipelines, the pump stations, what have you, the tunnels that course all the way from the Yosemite area over here to the Bay Area, 4.5 billion. So the rates are now really high and are going to continue climbing as all of their customers are going to be paying off the loans for that investment amount that was done in a 10-year period. So we're not alone. This is what's going on around the country.
I have another question, I'm sorry. You have the high-density housing you mentioned, and then you also mentioned how our water basins are so important. It's important that you allow that water to run in there. And the high densities are having a rather large footprint on the property. And as single-family property owners here, you know, we cannot put all this impervious surface out. How is that going to affect the water basins with all this high density going in, taking up the mass land?
Taking up what used to be pervious
That's
area.
right.
So oftentimes, when that gentleman asked Mike about what is this stormwater retention system, a lot of times when developers come in and build on a new area, they have to provide stormwater retention within that development so that what runs off of that piece of land is no greater than what was there before the buildings went in. So oftentimes you will see that, you have to look closely sometimes, but that the downspouts go to areas where there's vegetation, grasses, and they absorb and hold that water so it doesn't immediately run off into the gutters, run into the creeks, and then can cause flooding, right? You know, we haven't even talked about flooding, which is a whole other aspect of the district's mission. But the other thing that is also becoming very, just like the next thing in terms of water reuse is stormwater capture and reuse, all right? Stormwater is dirty, it runs off the streets, you've got everything that comes off of cars, rubber tires, and so most of the time it is not a pretty water, and yet that in the next several decades may be something else that we figure out how to harvest, all right, and retain. Right now, with the reservoirs that we have that ring our valley, I believe the number that gets put out is 80% of the rain that falls in this area is captured by those reservoirs. All right, that means 20% is what comes off of people's streets and houses and roofs and runs down gutters and into the local creeks and out to the bay. So when is that 20% then going to become another resource that technology and the innovations that may still come and the motivations to use that may become part of some kind of water supply for us too.
Let me just touch down on Prop 218 real quick.
Sure.
I'm trying to grasp my head around it. So my understanding on Prop 218, there are 3 ways to collect money: special taxes, assessments, and fees. So since you didn't go for a special tax or an assessment, is this a $250 million fee?
No, but so the way that Prop 218 applies to us is with our groundwater production charge, all right? What we call as, what we charge for people as they use our water. So we comply with Prop 218, and our process, I've got it written down because it's not something I do every day, but the way that the law is written, the groundwater production charge is levied on well owners. So if you don't own a well, you don't fall under Prop 218. But San Jose Water Company, who owns wells and is pumping up water from the basin to deliver to your homes, they fall under, we fall under their, I should say, approval to raise the water rates. So every year, we go through a Prop 218 process. And this is how it works. Number 1, we notify the well owners or the operators of wells of the proposed increase. So when we know that we're going to go from 680 to 747, we send out a letter. We have close to 5,000 well owners in this valley. in the South County, there's a big number of them because there's a lot of agriculture still going on, the lots are bigger, and so people just have wells in their yards and they pump the water. Here in North County, there aren't as many well owners because they are retailers and they'll have 10, 20, 30 wells, but those wells will serve hundreds of thousands of people, all right? So every one of them gets a letter to say, heads up, this is what we propose, and this is the board, this is what we propose to charge or increase the groundwater production charges, all right? Each well owner has the ability to protest that change in the cost, all right? And there are certain dates and times by which they have to send in a protest, all right? We collect all those protests, and the protests have to be majority plus one. So there has to be 50% plus one. So if we have, roughly speaking, 5,000 well owners, 2,501 of them would have to protest those groundwater production charge increases, and then our board could not enact them. All right, so this happens every single year. And then the board holds, as I said earlier, in April, the board holds a public hearing to say, we have gone out, we have given all the well owners notice, we have given them the dates and times. So we very carefully follow all of the procedures of that law. And then if the protests do not come in at 50% plus one, then the board may impose, then the board can go ahead and raise the rates then for the following year. So
Have they ever been more than 50%?
never, no. We
How
usually
many-
get.
How many does San Jose Water own? How many wells does San Jose Water Company own?
You know, I honestly don't
Because they
know.
own quite a few of the.
They own
More than
quite a few.
50%
Now,
now.
and very few of our water retailers actually protest. The most protests we get are from the well owners in South County, all right, who are more individual owners. And I believe that over the last several years, I believe that about, we've received somewhere between 5% and, it's usually around 5%. So about 100 protests come in. If we're talking about 5,000 people who can protest, all right? So if you want to protest, number one, come directly to our board.
Right.
Number two, contact your retailer and say, ridiculous, you've got to protest this because we just can't carry this kind of a burden, all right? And you know, that is your recourse when these annual processes take place.
Have any of your retailers protested?
I honestly don't know because I'm not involved in that. I don't know.
Great Oak, they're the ones
That's why their
that-
water rates
Yeah,
are
I believe
half
they're
of ours.
faithful, they're very consistent.
We'll
in
encourage your
proposing
retailers to protest. Okay. Thank you.
You're lucky you're a Great Oaks water customer.
Yes.
The question is the water
Nobody's happy yet.
district asking the state for these things called like a rebate from the $7 billion bond issue for storage? Are you asking for grants from the state?
We are constantly asking for grants. We are
Have
constantly
any been allocated?
trawling. Sometimes we're successful. We are constantly trawling the state system to see what grants are being given and to whom, what the requirements are. Do they fit our project? We have to be at a certain point of a project to qualify for them, but that is something that we pursue. Recently, we have been more successful on our flood protection side of the house, and we have received grants that offset the costs of enlarging or improving the creeks. Mike?
Second quick question, is there any way to get the $60 million back since the state has billions of dollars in surplus?
I think that we politely ask every once in a while, but it was just one of those things that happened, and I'm not qualified to speak on the details, so I don't want to give you misinformation, but it came as a shock to us when that happened. That was a very unusual event.
I think we'll ask for you, thank you.
General fund versus just having it, or?
It went into an ERAF fund, ERAF, and I honestly don't know what that is. You could probably Google it and tell us. And it was around 05, 06, something like that. We were one time. That's true. So in 2009, Congress passed what was known as the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And that was a bill that came to really try to put people back to work. This was at the height of the recession. And so that bill then funded billions of dollars of grants throughout the country for construction projects. So when people were ready to go to construction, they could apply. Some of that money was then provided to them, and that got people off the streets and into jobs. And we were at the time building that purification facility that takes the treated wastewater and purifies it. So we received $8 million out of what was originally about a $42 million construction project. We received $8 million from the federal government. Didn't have to pay it back. You know, it was just an outright grant to help us towards that construction. So, okay, any more questions? It's still only 3:30, so we
The clock is right twice a day. I just want to say.
I was just curious what we could do to encourage more oversight, just looking back through some of the filings from the grand jury and that, and in particular just referencing the lab where the initial quotes were $8 million and it turned into $20 million to do, and then some of the scale and scope of these other projects that are going on now seem considerably larger than what those were, and how that goes so wrong with
Okay, so I think the gentleman is referring to a laboratory that we constructed, what was it, around 2007?
Well, not as much about the lab, just as gross underestimate for the cost, and then we have so many other much larger projects is part of it, then also with the Army Corps of Engineers, if you know how much money is coming in from that, and is that only for the flood stuff, or is that because of emergency proclamation, or how long will that continue on? And it seems like to me, or at least in seeing others, and not so much in the government, but in the private sector with companies that go in and really push up to get these numbers, if there's price matching, what seems to be going on now with government agencies towards the district, and then they were critical, and I know this is thrown a lot at you, but the whole board of supervisors no longer having supervision, it's really unclear in terms of how you guys handle a quorum. The CIP seems to be the bulk of the money that's going out, and from reading the minutes, it's like there's maybe 3 board members that are there that are voting on these, and so you only need 2 votes, or do you know how many you need for these?
Well, so we have a 7-member board, and if there's only 3 people there, they can't hold the meeting. A quorum is 4. I can attest that 90% of the time there are 7 board members there. Occasionally one is not able to attend a meeting, but we also have, and you may or may not know that the board has several subcommittees. All right, smaller committees comprised usually of 3 board members. One of them is a CIP committee. All right, but they can't. Those 3 members cannot vote on anything. They can only advise the larger board. So I don't think that any votes take place with only 3 people present. Not at the Santa Clara Valley Water District. Okay. In terms of greater oversight, and you touched on the grand jury. The grand jury comes and pays us a visit every couple of years, and they just ask questions. We give them tours of our facilities. They ask to see our books. They ask to see our CIP. They ask us questions about all these projects. Are they really necessary? What is the benefit to the public? And so we do our best to be as transparent as we can. And our board is also very much a proponent of transparent government. So again, as I said earlier, the board meetings are where people are welcome to come and speak their minds, whether it's an item on the agenda or items, something that is water related that happens not to be on the agenda. So it's really the voice of the people that has to be heard in order for the board to pay attention. So I can't emphasize that enough. So I don't know if I can answer your question, because you really touched on a great number of different issues. We do the best that we can as engineers to develop an engineer's estimate as we design a project, so that we come close to what the contractors then, who don't know what our engineer's estimate is, we give them a range, and they come as close as they can based on the number of people they're gonna have working, the equipment they have, et cetera. And that's where it's a very competitive and, we believe, a fair bidding process. And our mandate is to use the lowest responsive bidder. So the person who comes in with the lowest bid, provided that all their paperwork is in order, they have done the right good faith efforts, they qualify, etc. All right, so that's a very public process. It's very open. There are times in a construction project when a lot of unknowns come, that unknown site conditions, unexpected changes in the building of something that then requires additional funds that have to be paid to the contractor. Again, that is just something that we deal with, and again, conscientiously try to minimize as every project goes out the door. But we're humans, as everybody is, and not everything is always done perfectly, and not everything is always done on time and under budget. The important thing here is that we continue to do the best we can as civil servants to keep the water flowing, to make sure that it's clean, it meets all the state drinking water standards, and it supports the life and the economy that we have here in this valley now and also for, decades to come.
Have you ever considered being a retailer? I know like with, Felton, I know that's a much, much smaller case, but in reading that, and then everybody's, voicing their concerns or disappointment with what's going on with San Jose Water and those costs, and it just doesn't seem right that, all of a sudden we're gonna be Flint, Michigan or something when they're discounting or trying to drive their bottom line, or do they get any of this government funding and that's offering help, offset them? I know they get the benefit of the pass-throughs and everything else that we're being on this side.
Right, yes. So our District Act, as I mentioned earlier, the legislative document that defines who we are and what we can do, it does not allow us to then become a retailer. So we'd have to go back to the state legislature and get all of those documents changed and enacted. It would probably be a difficult challenge, because we have these retailers who are private companies who are already established here, right? So for us to boot them out and become the retailers is probably something that likely won't happen. Yes.
So I used to work for a refinery a while back in the 90s. We spent like $1 billion to upgrade the refinery to the regulation. I think you equate that back down to the life of the project and per gallon. I think that came up to be 10 cents a gallon. So with this $2 billion that they're talking about over the life of all these projects, we're all the individual. When you take a look at it per month, how much of that is it? How much of an increase are we actually getting?
In terms of pennies per gallon.
Yeah.
So the gentleman said that he worked for a refinery that spent $1 billion to upgrade, and they looked at that cost over the life of that new system, and it came out to 8 cents per gallon of oil or gasoline that would come out of it. So again, here we are saying it's about a penny per gallon now to produce the drinking water. How much is another $2 billion of investments going to do? That remains to be seen. I can't do the math that fast. My whiz is Chris there in the corner. So
it's going to be dependent upon usage, unfortunately. So,
but
the reason you don't make it
it's not going to be $1,000 per gallon. And again, when you think about a penny per gallon, we often wonder, why do people buy bottled water, right, that costs so much per bottle, which is, it's not even a gallon, right? And so, we try to encourage people to drink the water that is provided, because in the long run, it is far less expensive than anything that's bottled and manufactured and sold by somebody who's making a profit. Okay.
Can I
Yes.
maybe just clarify? Is San Jose Water Company a public company? I know you said it was private, but.
It's a private company, and I
But
believe
it's
they
traded.
have shareholders, so I think it is traded.
It has a tenant, so does that make it a public company?
Well, so it's the
Publicly
different,
traded.
we have a different term for public and private. We should say government agency versus non-government agency. Basically, San Jose Water is a non-government agency. They are a for-profit entity with,
Absolutely.
you know, shareholders,
You
stockholders.
can buy their stock.
Right, so if you guys could all be stockholders at San Jose Water and you can vote, you know, with all of their normal board meetings or one annual meetings, you guys can do that. The water district is private in the sense that we're a government agency. We don't have stock, we are not for-profit. If you want to be part of the water district, you can be a volunteer, you can be an employee, but that's it.
Or run for the board.
Oh, yeah, run for the board. We welcome you if that is your purview too. You can always run for the board as well.
Yes, too much responsibility.
Responsibility. There
Something like this. I looked them up one time back in 2010, 2011, to announce their CEO made. I thought their CEO was somewhere in Houston. I'm not gonna say.
San Jose Water?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say how much they made, because you look it up yourself. You find out how much they made.
I don't know their statements. I didn't see it. I must be missing something where all this money is going, because I don't see any big hike in revenues. And they sure collected a hell of a lot more from me this year than they did last year.
San Jose Water, their staff is up 73%, their revenues are through the roof, they're making hand over fist money.
I didn't, well, all I could see that was published in the annual report was through 15, but that should have still shown something. The revenue was up 73%?
Yeah. No, their stock is up 73%.
Oh.
Their revenues are up 35.4%.
Okay.
So, yeah,
But they
they're-
don't count the surcharge as revenue, do they?
Oh, they do. Yeah, it goes into a holding memorandum account and then it gets switched over into.
I read about that, but I couldn't find what the holding memorandum account was.
That 60 million went to educational review augmentation fund, ERAF. So it went to K to 14 schools.
Okay, it's probably a time when the schools were really hurting for whatever reason, so money was collected and shunted over there. Yeah, thank you for that, yeah. But again, it was a one-time thing, but it was also because we were sitting on a nice pile of savings, which we then invested in some capital work to, you know, to bring it down and to protect those assets. So, okay, despite the fact of the hour, it is getting a little late. So I thank you very much for coming. Excellent questions, and I do appreciate all of your interest. I hear your concerns. I hope that the answers I've given have helped you to understand. I'll stay around for a few more minutes if you want to ask a few more questions. But again, we will be holding another meeting in February on this project. Wish you all safe and happy holidays.
If you have any comments or feedback, I'll be glad to take it. Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Great tour.
Thank you very much. So